Greetings. This is Global Entrepreneurship Week, Fort Worth 2021. I am your host, Joseph Horn, the president of the International Environmental Complex, aka the Ecoplex. I am privileged to have here today two distinguished gentlemen. One hails from a Fortune 500 company, and the other is an Emmy award-winning, Grammy-nominated international artist. And we are here today to talk trash. That's right. We're going to talk trash, specifically organic waste. And so I'd like to introduce you first to Eric Myers. Mr. Myers, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Joseph.
My pleasure, sir. Eric is the director of organic recycling of Waste Management, Inc. In case some of you may not know, it is the largest waste management company in the United States. From what I can tell, revenue is about $16 billion a year. It's an incredible amount, with over 21 million residential and commercial customers throughout the United States. Eric is also a fellow of the Aspen Institute and has been in the field of organic waste for several decades. So I assume he started out when he was a little kid. What challenges we're faced in dealing with a large company from his perspective, and we also have on the other side of the ring, Miguel Hogarth Bedoya. Good morning, Miguel.
Good morning, Joseph and Eric.
I would say good morning. Of course, it depends on what part of the country you're at. But anyway, Miguel, as mentioned, is a international symphonic conductor, founder of Cowboy Compost, and again, as the former director of the Fort Worth Symphony, he has conducted symphonies all over the world, from Japan to Europe, New Zealand, Australia, China, all the places that matter. He has conducted at major symphonies throughout the United States, and the list is so long, it would take up the whole program. So we're not going to go there. But we are very pleased to have both of them here today. Miguel, again, is also the founder of Cowboy Compost. And so, Miguel, I want to start with you. How did you get involved in Cowboy Compost? What is that and why?
Well, it all started for me as just doing my part as a local citizen in Fort Worth, where we moved in the year 2000. So, and our kids have gone to public schools, and you kind of pay attention to what happens in your cities. And I highly recommend to everybody to participate in your city's issues, topics, interests, because that's also how people know people, and then cities strive together because of that. And one of the topics that was coming up at the city level was that because Fort Worth is a city that is growing so quickly, I think we're ranked number 12 or 13 in the whole country as far as population, not in Metroplex, but by city. The growth of population brings other issues. Water could be one, and waste is another one. And so if the cities were not prepared 50 years ago to handle anything such as water or waste or electricity, et cetera, then there was an alarm sounding by the city saying that because the population is growing so much, our landfill is going to fill up something like 30 years ahead of schedule. And so, they were putting this data, this information, and just letting us know that we should be aware, but not only that, we can potentially be part of either the solution or the action. And I firmly believe in that. So I used to give a talk, almost like a TED talk, and it was one thing in common. And I always said music is the one thing in common that all humans have, but actually it's not, because there's some people that don't necessarily like music or prefer silence, or maybe newborns that, it could be. So I had to change my talk, because now I thought music was the one thing we have in common, but the one thing we have in common for sure, whether we want it or not, is we all humans of any age and wherever we are, we produce waste. So that means we should just be responsible on how we handle our waste, particularly now in situations like in Fort Worth, where the city is saying, if we don't think, first of all, if we are not aware of it, we don't think and try to do something about it, we're going to have a problem sooner. And that was the thing, sooner. And the sooner was, getting closer because of the ratio of waste going into the landfill. So that's how it just drew my attention. And I've lived and worked in countries such as New Zealand and Norway. They handle waste very differently, and in Japan as well. So I was kind of familiar with different practices at the citizen level. And that's how it all started for me.
Thank you very much. That's an important point. As I understand, the landfill in Fort Worth is 85 to approaching 90% full, and that brings up a lot of issues. And you're right. You mentioned Norway. As I understand, Norway even imports trash from other countries, including United Kingdom and elsewhere, waste, because they incinerate it.
They produce energy.
That is part of their resource. Germany is also a large importer of waste. In America, we seem to bury it. And that's where we come with feedback. Now, let's take it to you, Eric. That brings up a lot of issues, and you've been involved in organic waste recycling for waste management, which again is not only a large international or say national company in Fortune 500 in waste management, but also a leader in the environment.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. I mean, we at Waste Management have been working really hard to try and manage the waste that we all generate. We run 70% of our trucks now run on natural gas. We do have landfills, about 265 landfills. Almost 150 of those have landfill gas to energy projects associated with them, where we're taking the gas that's generated and putting it to good use. So we're really focused on sustainability for all of us in the communities we serve, as well as our kids, and thinking about the future. And from an organic standpoint, we have over 40 of our own organics recycling facilities, not unlike what Miguel has. We have compost facilities. We have some new technologies we've developed. One's called CORE, C-O-R-E, where we take food waste and we convert it into energy, biogas, in a pretty efficient way. We have that technology is deployed in Los Angeles and in New York City and Boston, New Jersey. Fairly, new technology that's really exciting as yet another way to manage organics. So, we're focused on all aspects of waste management. Me and my team are specifically focused on figuring out how to take the organic portion of the waste stream, pull it out of the landfills, and figure out higher and better uses of it. Oh, I think you're muted, Joseph.
Thank you very much. Good to hear you. Yeah. Eric, tell us a little bit more about CORE.
So CORE is a process where we're able to take food waste and separate out the non-degradable fraction from the degradable fraction. So when you try and deal on a small scale, we think of food waste as plate scrapings and maybe cuttings from preparing food. When you start dealing with it on a really large scale, hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of tons, inevitably you're going to get things like plastic in there. Miguel probably knows about this because it's a huge challenge. And when we recycle organics, we make products like compost, nobody wants to spread compost with little bits of plastic. So we developed CORE as a way to efficiently separate out the degradable from the non-degradable fraction. And then we went a step further. We think of food waste as one category, but it's really, when you break it down, food waste is fats and carbohydrates and sugars and proteins, those groupings. And all of those different types of food waste have different energy value. And so part of CORE is to then separate out the degradable and non-degradable way, and then take that material that's left over, the good stuff, and essentially we test and combine and mix it to make a very consistent product. And that product we then put into anaerobic digesters at municipal wastewater treatment plants. And folks may or may not be familiar with wastewater treatment, but essentially, wastewater, everything that goes down the drain, unless it goes into a septic system, goes to a treatment plant, and they take that dirty water and they make it clean. And some of those plants bolt on a technology on the back end called anaerobic digestion to further break the material down. And when they do that, they'll capture the gas and use that to either heat their facilities or create energy, or even clean it up and put it back in the pipeline as a renewable natural gas. And so we are able to take the product from Core, which we call EBS, it's an engineered bioslurry, and put it into that digestion process and create a lot of energy that we can capture and then use. So that's the Core process.
Amazing. So Core is a way to convert organic waste to different things. So gas is one, natural gas, which we assume would be used to power an electric plant. And what happens to the other waste? They can be used for fertilizer, or is it burned, or what are the different uses that you're looking at for that?
Yeah, so on Core, the primary product we make is energy. So that's the value in Core. With our compost facilities, we make products that end up going into the soil like Miguel does, where we may take compost and use that back in agricultural or landscaping applications. You can also combine it with other ingredients and make very tailored products. So we do a lot of work, say on the West Coast of the US with vineyards, where we'll work with their agronomists and make a very specific product that includes compost and other ingredients to make a really whole nutrient pack that you can put into the soil that helps their plants to grow.
That's amazing. That sounds very exciting. I'm glad to hear about that. And again, that would not require separation from the user, right? The client, the customers. The Core would actually separate the plastics from the organic matter.
That's right. Core was designed, it's really an urban solution. So you take commercially generated food waste from universities, hospitals, grocery stores, the challenge with all those groups, a lot of that business is somewhat more transitory. So employees may come and go. There's sometimes language challenges. So they generate a lot of food waste, but to get it reliably clean is really difficult. So we hope that we receive it clean enough, but if we don't, we can handle it with the Core process. And the great thing about Core is we put it into urban environments. So we have, for example, a facility in New York City that services New York City, and we're not driving 50 miles out to the country to a compost facility. We're driving a few miles across New York City and going to their wastewater treatment plant and putting that in there to create energy.
Thank you. I've read the statistics on how many people work in New York City and collecting trash. It was like 21,000. It's an incredible number, and the work that goes into it. And that's all exciting. Is there a Core facility in Texas? I don't recall, I think you mentioned that there is one.
No, there isn't yet. It's not cheap to produce this system, and we're trying to drive cost out of it. So New York City is very different, and the economics are very different. I think everybody wants to recycle organics, and the trick is to figure out how to do it as cost effectively as you can. So the collection side of it is challenging. To collect source separated organics, it isn't always easy. So we don't look at Core as one solution. We have a suite of solutions, including compost facilities and Core facilities and other technologies, to try and figure out what applies best to the region where we're trying to recycle those organics.
That all sounds exciting. It sounds like some opportunities for entrepreneurs in this area. Miguel, in your background, how did you start Cowboy Compost? What was your experience? What motivated you to do that?
Well, one of the key words that Eric mentioned is sustainability, right? How do you sustain anything that you do? And also environment. And I find that these two words can scare people away because, oh, the environment, there's nothing I can do for the environment. But the environment can be your office, your house, your neighborhood, your street. I mean, you can define your own, the one you are involved with. And to me, was also catching on a key word from Eric is participation, which leads you to either separation or contamination. So, and I was very interested in what can we do as individuals, just a little thing, you know? And Cowboy Compost started because in the entirety of Fort Worth, there was not a single company that handled that, you know, topic, request, or issue. Right? There's mulching, absolutely, yeah, but to create compost and then create something that goes back to the soil. So I reached out to some that became friends in Dallas, but the driving is not sustainable. Why would you be driving 50 miles, right? Then you defeat the purpose of your carbon footprint. So I went to the city and I said, what would it take to start something like this? Like at least with food scraps, like simple, like what we do in our backyards, you know, but there are people that don't have time and so on. So, you know, I'm good friends with the mayor or the outgoing mayor, Price was my neighbor. So, and when you're a citizen, you know people, you know, you're members of city council, and they're part of your, you know, your daily lives in a certain way. So I was basically given the green light to present data. And data could be two things. Could be output or could also be individual participation, what I call awareness. Because if there's not the awareness about anything, then it doesn't matter how good the company is about doing something because you don't have awareness of the good that a solution like CORE can be, right? So I think education, awareness, but I don't want to sound insulting to say I'm educating people. No, I'm just doing something, and if people sort of tag along, that's great. So I use my public figure and visibility that I had, just, you know, reaching out to thousands of people every weekend. I mean, we're talking about 6,000-8,000 people. And when in the summers, we reach out through concerts in the gardens, I mean, tens of thousands of people. So I reached out to my co-workers. So the Fort Worth Symphony, between musicians and staff, it's about 100 households. So I gathered everybody and I said, I have this idea, not while I have a dream, but I have this idea. And, you know, I made a little presentation about the ways that we produce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly you realize that people thought, for instance, that when you throw food into the sink and it gets, you know, mashed away, then it goes to a compost facility. Some thought that, because why not? It says throw the food there, right? Or if I throw something out in the open, it'll just compose itself because it's compostable and things like that. So to make the story short, a friend of mine helped me, a friend who's not in music, who is now my business partner, Johanna Calderon, helped me with, you know, pickup trucks and other things I didn't have. And we reached out to some companies, some in Canada, that have buckets that are sealed to prevent, you know, from insects to come in. So I gave, I don't know, maybe 70 households from my workplace sign up. And this was the idea. You have a clean bucket. And at the end of the week, when you come to work, there'll be a truck or a pickup truck in the parking lot. You bring me all your food scraps. There's a list of what you can put. So the yes and the no, because if that doesn't happen, then I really have no data. Or I could have data that shows how poorly it is, you know?
So let me understand. Here you are, an international symphonic conductor, doing presentations among the rich and the wealthy, philanthropists, others. And here you are asking people and neighbors to bring you their trash.
Yeah, because it's not trash, really. It's a resource. So, but I was collecting data because that was the task. See, when I don't know something, I would go to who knows something and tell me and guide me. So I was guided. As a matter of fact, the folks that work for the city in various departments gave me tasks. Do this, this is how you do it. You know, be careful here, be careful there. So, but as I was saying, they come to work with the bucket, and we keep data saying how many people live in that household and how much is there, if it's a 5-gallon or a 7-gallon bucket, or if they need 2 buckets. So it was quite meticulous and tedious in a good way, but then in turn they would get a clean bucket. So we went through the trouble of inspecting every bucket to make sure that there was no contamination, or learn that in fact you're not paying attention of what you're putting in there. So that went on for about 6 weeks, and the data, it was quite showing. I mean, the organic waste is very heavy. It's very heavy. I mean, you can have a 5-gallon bucket and you can barely lift it depending on what you put in there. If you put, styrofoam, it'll be, fluff. So it was the weight that we had to learn how to do it. So then I went to the city and I said, here's your data. And they said, great, what? Now what? Well, that's it. Well, that can't be it, because what's the point of having data? So, and with this friend of mine, with Johanna, who's a business entrepreneur, she said, let's just do it. So we created a company, and we started very small with offering the same 50 people a delivery service or a pickup service, I suppose, at their homes. And that was quite complex, because you are kind of gambling on something big with a few. But we didn't have to sell them the idea. We just told them it's done. And suddenly, after 6 or 8 weeks of doing, they went into the habit. It's like, oh, no, I cannot do this. I cannot just now throw all my peels and this and da. And of course, little by little, other compostable items were added in there. But that's how it started. And then with a business partner, then you have somebody looking after, businesses that want to be either more green. For instance, Whole Foods opened in Fort Worth as the time we were starting, and they kind of have, by mandate, they are, sustainable at various levels. So they reached out to us, and that's how it all started. It's almost word of mouth. And we serve our community. What I say is the waste stays in town and comes back into town. So we partner with composting facilities to create our own compost, that the subscribers get the benefit of 1 bag or something like that per end of cycle. So they actually can see the return. It's a bit poetic in a certain way, and it sustains as well. And my idea is, how can I learn from individuals like Eric, and how can this be for the good of the community and not for just a local project? Because after all, even recycling in Fort Worth is not mandatory. And that's one of the biggest things, is the concept of sustaining or making waste sustainable, or waste management sustainable, is not really there to start with. In Fort Worth, unless you are a single household that you already have recycling as part of your services, then any other non-residential dwelling, like multi-family dwellings, businesses of any kind, churches, schools, they don't have to recycle. So the amount of waste produced is large. So at least I feel better that there's a small solution at hand, but I feel better that at least before there was zero option to this.
That's fascinating. And thank you for bringing that up. It shows how a lot of us as individuals, we can transform the world by taking part in it and acting on it. And yes, corporations like Eric, they're doing great work and doing efforts, but quite frankly, we all have a part and responsibility in this. Miguel, you touched on a lot of different topics there. And one thing you mentioned about, I think, was the definition of an environmentalist. And I absolutely agree with you. My perspective is, if you care about people, if you care about pets, if you care about your lawn, if you care about hunting, any of those things, you're an environmentalist, because you care about the environment or something in the environment around you. You mentioned about recycling on the commercial side not being mandatory. And I've seen tremendous amounts of, I would think, wonderfully recyclable materials on the commercial side that I would think would be economically easier to collect and process than it would be on the consumer side, where consumers kind of throw everything together and it's not as much. Eric, what do you have to think or say about that on the commercial side and making it mandatory? And to add real quick, San Francisco, as I understand, requires or mandates organic recycling or composting. If you don't do it, then you pay more. Is that something we should be looking at? So a couple of questions there.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have somewhere around 8 states in the US that now have some sort of ban against food waste. It's maybe not all food waste from going to a landfill, but they go after the bigger pieces like grocery stores and large generators of food waste. And you also have major cities like San Francisco, Austin, Texas, Seattle, that also have their own, regulations and policy. And I think those policies certainly make a big difference. We tend to look at where those are happening or about to happening, and that's where we try and build infrastructure. If it's required, it sure helps to feed these facilities. And if it's not required, then some folks may be really interested in doing it. Like I bet the 3 of us on this call and a lot of the listeners who are listening to this. But there's a whole bunch of other people that maybe it's not such a priority, and so they may be less likely to do it unless they're required to. So we certainly encourage that, whether it's traditional recycling, paper, glass, plastic, aluminum, tin cans, or it's organics.
Eric, and waste management, what would be the ideal situation you love for a city to do from your perspective? And of course, it's got to help the ROI for waste management, but also which would be good for the environment. If you
we look at,
what would you want?
We look at what we call 3 legs of the sustainability stool. It has to be socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. And so I think one of the things that it's really good, and we're seeing this now at the state level, is some of the early adopters of organics legislation learn some things. And so the states that are implementing those rules now are taking those learnings and trying to step into development in a really logical way. And so I think that's one of the things that I think is really good, whether you're a city or a state or a region, a county, to learn what's been successful in other places. You have to encourage both companies like Waste Management and entrepreneurs like Miguel with smart but streamlined permitting processes to make it easy to develop or easier to develop facilities. In some states we operate, from the minute we decide we want to build an operation, it may take us 3, 4, 5 years to go through the permitting process. So trying to figure out how to streamline that while still protecting the environment is really important. As well as sometimes you need grants and incentives to stimulate people to take a step to develop a project or program. So those are some of the things that we would tend to recommend if about how to go about it for a state or a city.
That's fascinating. And Eric, with respect to the states that have legislated organic recycling, have the benefits been shown to be market, or in other words, if we were to take this information and bring it to the Texas legislature, would it be convincing to them to say this is not only good for business, but it's good for the environment? It's not a political issue. It's not a Democratic or Republican issue. It's a sensible solution.
Yeah, I think that's right. We like to say all organics is local. Compost use in California might be very different than in Minnesota, right? We have the breadbasket of California with agriculture that's, can use organic matter back in the soil. So that makes a lot of sense. In Minnesota, we grow things, but in the middle of the winter, you may not be able to put that material to good use. So you may have to be able to store it. That costs more money. So trying to overlay the environmental benefits with what is happening locally is really important. Like I said, having some of those, incentives is really important, in training to help, promote good environmental stewardship. I think also, we sometimes just think about the economics of cost of the operation. There's also the economics of greenhouse gas emissions, right? What happens if we don't do this? And so I think that when you start to factor in that into the dialogue, it changes people's perspectives. So those are all important areas to press down on and try and think through.
Thank you very much. That's very important. I appreciate that. Miguel, you're a, no offense, small time operator. You're not a Fortune 500 company. What do you see the future of your company, and how do you view the large companies in relation to what you're doing? And this is important for entrepreneurs who are out there maybe listening, because Global Entrepreneurship Week has viewers from over 50 different countries sometime, and viewers from other states. We all are looking to you all for ideas and opportunities to go into that could be good for the environment and make trash the new gold.
Well, in my case, the points are big. First, are we all in the same boat? Are we all in the same planet? Probably, but then we're all in different cities. But so you have to find what unites you to your neighbor, to your literally members of your city, and so on and so forth, the closest by. And I think that can be a point of start. And when we all agree that this is for the good of us, literally, or my children, your children, the next generation, I don't buy this idea of, well, I'll be dead, so I don't really care. I just, somebody gave this place to you beforehand, somebody, right? So I just like to treat that with the same courtesy. Now, I'm hoping that you weren't in a place that said, God, really, you put me here? But hopefully, that's not something you want to pass on as your legacy, either as a family or as a city,
Miguel,
and so on and so forth.
Thank you. I remember you talking to me a long time ago. You mentioned about at the end of every symphonic performance that you conducted, you would see in the back of the symphony hall huge piles of cups and trash, and
right.
Thousands of people are visiting with you, and thousands get drinks. My gosh, that's a lot of trash.
Right. But again, that's the policy of the venue, right? But the one thing I was able to do, so, okay, it's a question of economic impact or incentive, which Eric also mentioned. Is there an incentive to either make it convenient, practical, and maybe enticing? So I asked one time, do we have a budget for water bottle? Out of curiosity, because in an arts organization, the budget is, you count it, even though if the Ford Symphony, it's a $12 million budget, but that's peanuts compared to a corporation. But nonetheless, it's $1 million of payroll that has to go every month, or $500,000 every 2 weeks. So when you need to buy instruments and this, and so you start looking at every possible thing. Are you saving in energy? Are you this, da, da, da? So people look at what you spend just to be responsible. So it occurred to me to ask, do we have a budget for bottled water? Because I see a lot of bottled water, and particularly when we perform outdoors. So you just see a lot of it. So it just occurred to me to ask that question for my information. And I said, obviously, no, there's no line that says bottled water. It's under miscellaneous, of course. So I asked, can this be put together? Sure, it can be put together. So over a little time, they started gathering. So it was roughly, it was only like $12,000 a year, but that's $1,000 a month. Not only was the cost, the crew, as in the staff, had to carry these things around, had to step out of work to go and mobilize water to chill them, bring them back. So they weren't working. So I think the cost was bigger because that takes time. And then you have to drive this to the parks and again, chill them and move them again. And because they're not recycled at the venue, they just piled up. So I'm thinking, so we're spending $12,000 on something that we could. So we invested in a fountain, filter fountain, and we gave everybody nice stainless steel with our logo. And I've seen artists now. As a matter of fact, we tell guest artists, if you're going to bring your water, you bring your own, or we give you a stainless steel reusable and you can keep it forever. And there's a faucet, with filter, help yourself to as much as you want. But we're not carrying It was sort of the point wasn't really the money or the recycling. It was just, this doesn't make sense when we have other things to prioritize in our organization, right? So this is how I see things. And now, of course, you can say, well, you create a problem, you solve a problem, you create a problem for somebody else. I don't know, honestly, because I don't have anything against the water bottle industry, which actually is incredibly profitable in the world. But we all have to choose what we do. You drink Coca-Cola or you drink Pepsi. So it's a choice. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. But in my environment, you see, my environment had that particular issue. Outside my environment, maybe that issue didn't exist. So I kept finding these things here and there. There's one study, I don't know, Eric, if you've come around even this thought, that I haven't done yet, but I would like to know, like on Super Bowl day, how many pizza cartons, because once they're greased, actually they're perfect, for compost, if the proteins and the fats are the right one, right? So I kind of would like to know nationwide, how many pizza cartons are there? Like if every household would just take a little picture of the ones you have used, that number I have not found, but I would like to visualize it. One time I was conducting at the Sydney Opera House, and they addressed the issue of pollution. I mean, the waterways in the harbor was really, really getting very dirty, mainly with plastic bottles, cans. And it's not that people litter necessarily, but the weather doesn't help. I mean, wind and rain would just bring, if it's not contained properly. So the harbor was really getting really very, very, very dirty. So they went on to a project of a long time to collect all of this, and they built a replica of the Sydney Opera House only with trash that they found in the harbor over time to visualize it. This is, because when you see one or two floating, you don't get the full picture. So I like that idea of visualizing what it is, what you don't see. As a matter of fact, when I visited our landfill, it's only 4 miles from my house. I didn't know that it was there, and it was the size of 200 football fields. But normally people don't visit it or don't know that that's what it is. And it's getting higher because it's getting higher. I think the methane is only being flared. So I'm hoping that, with Eric's knowledge and company, that there are solutions to sustain, because that thing is going to stay there. So whether mining or sorting out, it's 200 football fields in the middle of the city, because in the 70s, that wasn't the middle of the city. That was really far away from the city. So that's also part of the situations we encounter. But I love those things. I don't run away from those. But you asked the question, what would be my ideal future for Cowboy Compost? It would be partnering with the big ones and see, we all have combination of ideas and we reach out to people differently. And so joint efforts, combine efforts for the greater good, and so that all companies can be sustainable too. So in fact, we are partnering with a few that let us do compost, for instance. So Waste Management serves our city, but Republic actually leases. And then Living Earth manages the compost. So it's a four companies. We work together to get one thing done. And because Cowboy Compost currently serves the city of Fort Worth through this, it's now in the almost third year of a free compost drop-off station program, that it's going quite well. And it's joint effort. That's all I'm saying. It has to be joint effort, because the topic is too big for anyone to handle. Because you may have great solutions, but if people don't actually help you to do it, I always say it's like you have salt in your hand, a bunch of salt, and then, oh, hang on, I need to do something with this. Give me a second. And you drop it in water. Now your hands are free. You get your task. Blah, 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 blah. Half an hour later, oh, I need the salt. Oh, I'm sure you can take it out of a glass. It costs a fortune, but you can take it through, the desalination process. But you already made the issue complicated by the decision beforehand. So if you need to do something before you let go of your waste, manage it properly, and then you won't have this issue after the fact.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful to hear. You brought up a lot of things, and also with respect to the trash that goes into the ocean. Every minute, one garbage truck full of plastic is dumped into the ocean. And over a year, that brings 10 million tons of plastic into the ocean. And we're treating the ocean as a garbage dump. And And again, we're ingesting it in our bodies. It's going into the food system, the food chain. And so we need to look at a way of managing our waste and better. And we're so fortunate to have Miguel and Eric here to talk about that. Eric, you heard Miguel as a small entrepreneur. He is taking action, doing what he can. And you mentioned about possibly legislative action. Another thing that we could do as entrepreneurs, as people who are just concerned citizens, try to seek or get legislative action to look at sensible ways to manage our waste and monetize it as well. Eric, Waste Management is a huge national company, and of course you know that, obviously, you're part of it. How do people like Miguel and others that want to talk or get involved in partnerships, how do they get involved with some of the efforts that Waste Management is doing? And maybe you could talk about some of the things that Waste Management is doing within the communities throughout the United States, and how we can, again, get involved and partner and share ideas, because we do have a common goal.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Miguel and I share a lot more than you might realize, because I started out in a small entrepreneurial company with a leader not unlike Miguel, who started composting. That was literally the first project that this entrepreneur did, you know, I'm going to date myself here, but in the late 80s. And we grew and grew, and, you know, I've always been passionate about the environment, so I wanted to get involved there, but it was not with a big corporation. And I'm actually thrilled now to be part of Waste Management, because Waste Management is really trying to solve for all the challenges that we all create. So in turn, we work closely with a lot of different organizations. The U.S. Composting Council is a great one that brings together everything from literally people who are collecting buckets on bicycles all the way through to Waste Managements of the world, who, you know, last year we recycled 3.5 million tons of organics, which sounds great. It's a big number. It's a lot bigger, you know, than it was 10 years ago, but it's pales in comparison to what we still throw away. So we got a lot of work left to do. But participating in some of those groups, there's some great training programs that they have if people are entrepreneurs and want to learn more. You know, there's a lot of other organizations, you know, biogas organizations and recycling organizations, National Waste and Recycling Association, and state and local chapters of recycling and composting operations that are all vehicles to put all the best minds together. And frankly, Waste Management is not going to solve this problem. We're going to try and do our part. It's going to be us and Miguel and all the other people that are out there, all pressing down and really thinking hard about this and collaborating. And that's the way, you know, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm convinced that we can do it. You know, you look at when I was in school, we were talking about acid rain. And for those who maybe are, you know, weren't around 30 years ago, you may go, what's acid rain? Well, acid rain was a huge issue because of emissions from some of our power plants, and we solved for it. We worried about a hole in the ozone, and as a society, we solved for that. And I think it's the same with organics. You can't solve the climate change issues that we're facing without solving for organics. It's you know, 20 to 25% of the waste stream, and it generates a lot of potential emissions. So we all need to work together, and that's in big and small ways, whether it's home composting or building the, you know, 150,000 ton, you know, facility. We need to do all those things.
Well, I'm excited about that and to hear those efforts, and appreciate the partnerships too. Here at the Ecoplex, our goal is collaboration and promote collaboration among the different sectors, from the NGOs to the corporations, and bring people together. We do believe that solutions can occur, but as Eric and Miguel, I think both indicated, it requires each of us to do our part. We can't delegate our responsibility to other organizations or political leaders. The responsibility lies with us individually. And we look forward to working with large companies and small companies and entrepreneurs and moving forward in that partnership and collaboration and pushing that. So last thoughts for any entrepreneurs that are listening to us. Miguel, do you have any closing thoughts?
Wow, that's a big ask, because I'm really an artist. Entrepreneurship is, to me, being aware what's around you first, and then if it's beyond you, sure, I don't think I have that capability yet. And see if you can be of help or service to that particular situation, let's put it this way, rather than be a reactionary to opposing something because of no reason. I don't get that either. So I like to see that and being an entrepreneur is to create an opportunity that you can be of help, service, and be sustainable and profitable at the same time.
You made a very good point about, and I guess it alludes to some of the polarization that some people view being an environmentalist as someone who's an extreme. At the same time, again, corporate America has embraced environmentalism or sustainability. 90% of them issue sustainability reports. Walmart has Project Gigaton. JP Morgan has invested or committed $200 billion to sustainable development. We have many other corporations that are doing phenomenal things in this area because it improves ROI. It makes the products made more efficiently, safer, less litigation down the line, and it adds more value to the consumer, and it's all around good. And what's good for the companies is good for society, and hopefully make us more resilient and take care of the nature and the community around us. And Eric, any closing thoughts on your side for entrepreneurs? And it's wonderful to hear that you're an entrepreneur like Miguel as well. So you're breaking bread on the same things. So any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, pursue your passion. I love what Miguel's story. It's pretty inspiring. You know, I think if I ever tried to lead a symphony, that would be a disaster. So I'm so impressed with his ability to come into the organics recycling space and make a difference. But I would just say, engage, get involved. What gets me up every day, and at the end of the day, wishing I had more time, was my passion for this space. And it's going to take all of us to do it. And there's a lot of different ways that you can be entrepreneurial. So find what works for you, and go for it. That's what I would say.
Thank you. That's a good closing remarks too. I agree that if you do something you're passionate about, you never work a day in your life. And gentlemen, it sounds like both of you have found a passion that you love. Maybe in Miguel's case, you have multiple passions, and I'm sure, Eric, you have some secret passions as well, others that we didn't talk about today. So I'll do. Thank you very much, both of you, for being at this presentation. Again, for our viewers, this is going to be available on our website, egoplex.us, as well as Global Entrepreneurship Week Fort Worth. Thank you, gentlemen, and have a wonderful, excellent week. Keep safe, and we will follow your advice.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you
Eric.
so much.